Please be seated.
Good evening. I'm glad they left me 30 minutes for this lesson. I appreciate that. I will not fill that time slot. I can promise you that. You would turn your Bibles to Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6. We had talked a couple of weeks ago when I filled in for the adult Bible class on Wednesday. We had talked about idolatry a little bit, and you know, some of the points that we made is wherever we look for satisfaction, wherever we look for security and things that we devote our time to and our resources to, where your devotion really truly lies. That's how we tell what our God is, and what we really worship is what we dedicate our lives to. And that's what we discussed a couple of weeks ago. Is God really first in our lives, is what we looked at. God can bless us with so many good things. We know that He gives us all good things that pertain to life and godliness. He's given us everything we need. He continually blesses us, and it's up to us to decide how we're going to use those blessings. But sometimes we can take those blessings and turn them into quote-unquote idols, or put them in the place of God where they get all of our attention and our time. We had a quote that I mentioned a couple weeks ago, and it says, idolatry is taking a good thing and making it into an ultimate thing. And I think that's something for us all to think about. And I want to continue the thoughts. We had talked about putting relationships first in our life, such as our relationship with our spouse or our children before our relationship with God. And we talked about how our spouse and our children are a blessing, but they're not the ultimate thing. God should be number one in our lives, not our spouses, not our children. And tonight I want to focus on the idol of politics, or the idol of putting your country before God. That's kind of maybe a weird concept, or something we don't think about too much. But if you'll think back in ancient society, citizens of many nations regarded their rulers as a form of deity. We can see that all throughout history. And in Daniel chapter 6, we're just going to read it is Daniel chapter 6. We'll begin reading in verse 7. It says, all the governors of the kingdom, the administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisors have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. Therefore King Darius signed the written decree. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home. And in his upper room, with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Then these men assembled and found Daniel provocation before his God. Now I want you to think about this. They had signed that decree that Darius nobody could petition any god or any man except for the king. And Daniel was faced with obeying the law of the land or obeying God. They had basically set Darius up as a living idol, is what they had done. Daniel knew that writing was signed, but I always found it interesting ever since I've read this from years and years ago that Daniel knew that law was in place, but Daniel still prayed, even though he knew the consequences of what was going to happen. That's a strong faith that we can look to right there. And it makes me think that no matter what's going on in the country, no matter what laws are in the land, a child of God has to act like a child of God. Whether it's in the Old Testament, whether it's in the New Testament, Christians have to Christian, so to speak, and the church has to church, if that makes sense. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world. No king or law or punishment was going to convince Daniel to forsake his allegiance to his God, or cause Daniel to replace the position of God with something else in his life. In our day and time, we're not asked to bow down to our leaders. We're not asked to pray to an image of our country. But sometimes we place our trust and our security in our country or in our military or some of our leaders. And we've got to be careful not to make our country or the different things God has blessed us with in this land as an idol in our hearts. And that's really what makes it harder to identify as Christians. It's easy to identify idolatry when you carve out a wooden statue and you bow down before it. It's a little more difficult when it's something, more abstract, where you have to see people's actions and how they're putting things in their life and how they're placing their priorities. I think about when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, and God had 10 plagues to have them released from their bondage from the Egyptians. And I often would think about, why didn't God just do this with one plague? God could have snapped his fingers and they could have been released in the blink of an eye, but he went through 10 different plagues to make sure that they would be released. And I think part of the reason is that God wanted to show the Egyptians and also show the Israelites that strength and power reigns in heaven. If one plague would have been enacted, well, that could have been a fluke that got those Israelites out of Egypt. But when those 10 plagues happened consecutively, when it was predicted and prophesied before they took place, it could be nothing else but the power of God and the strength of God, and that's where it is. It's not in the government, but in God. And I think God was trying to teach Israel not to put their faith in the earthly kingdom, that there would be no earthly kingdom that's stronger than the God of heaven. And you'll fast forward a little bit in time in Exodus chapter 16. After they got out of Egypt, where did they keep setting their eyes toward and longing for? They kept longing to go back to Egypt. After God had done all those things for them, it's, man, I wish we were back in Egypt. We wouldn't be starving if we were back in Egypt. And they kept having that mentality that Egypt was going to save them, or there was something greater than God that was going to save them or take care of them. And if you think about all the things that God had done for the Israelites up until the point they were into the wilderness, into the land of Canaan, that they had the 10 plagues that God had shown them. They had crossed the Red Sea on dry ground. It says that God, if you remember, that he guided them with a pillar of cloud and fire in Exodus chapter 13. God gave them food and water for a great multitude of people in Exodus chapter 16 when he brought them manna and then quail in Numbers chapter 11. If you remember, their garments and their sandals never did wear out because God was there showing that his strength was with them, that he would take care of them. They didn't need anybody else. That was in Deuteronomy chapter 29. And then, of course, God helped them conquer their enemies and did all of these things for them to show that they should put their hope and trust in God. If you'll remember in 1 Samuel chapter 8, what did they ask for? God had blessed them with all these things, and then they had the audacity to basically tell God that they wanted a king in 1 Samuel chapter 8. They wanted a king so they could put their trust in that king, so that king could lead and protect them, as if somehow God wasn't a sufficient job for them. And then you fast forward even further in time in Isaiah chapter 30, verses 1 and 2. They wanted to create an alliance with Egypt. They said, man, Egypt is so strong. We should team up with Egypt. That way their strength can take care of us. They had all these thoughts going through their mind instead of just relying on God and what he would do for them, that they were somehow trying to put all their trust and hope in other places, whether it be a king or another country. Now, as Christians, we are told in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, that we are to pray for our leaders. We are to give them honor. We know that we should love our country, be good citizens. We should, as Christians, obey the laws of the land. But we cannot let our love for our country be an idol. Our patriotism can't be and must not be an idol. We need to make sure that we love God more. I know I love our country. I think that God has blessed us with the greatest country that has ever existed. That's my opinion. Some of y'all may have a different opinion, But God's blessed us with a great nation where we can prosper, where we can preach the Word of God without any fears from the government. And God has done all these blessings for us, but that's not to take the place of other things that God has blessed us with. For example, the church. God has given us the church for a specific reason, and one reason for the church is to help to get us to heaven. We're here for each other to help encourage, to be a pillar and ground of the truth, and to make sure that other people hear the message. And our country can never take the place of God or even take the place of the church. And I think we have to remember just how important the church to this great nation that we live in. So let's be thankful for everything that God has blessed us with, our homes, our family, our jobs. But let's not turn the good things that God has blessed us with into something that takes the place of our God. We offer an invitation. If you have any need of the church today, we would love to help you. Please come as together we stand and we sing.